The highway stretched before me, a ribbon of asphalt that seemed to go on forever, vanishing into the distant horizon. It was one of those evenings where the setting sun cast a warm orange hue across the landscape, creating a surreal blend of colors. The radio softly played an old tune, and the world felt like a tranquil place. As I cruised along the empty road, I couldn't help but feel a sense of serenity that was almost therapeutic. I'd always cherished moments like this, when I could escape the hustle and bustle of everyday life and lose myself in the solitude of the open road. Little did I know that the tranquility of this evening drive was about to be disrupted in the most unexpected way. Just as the sun dipped below the horizon, I noticed a lone figure ahead, their thumb extended in a classic hitchhiker's gesture. My initial instinct was to keep driving, as the warnings I'd heard about picking up strangers echoed in my mind. However, something about this particular hitchhiker tugged at my conscience. They seemed stranded, vulnerable, and I couldn't simply leave them there. I cautiously pulled over to the side of the road, the engine idling. The hitchhiker, who had been nothing more than a distant silhouette, approached my car. As they drew nearer, I noticed that they were dressed in dark, nondescript clothing, their face concealed by a hood and sunglasses. The hood cast deep shadows over their features, making it impossible to discern their age or gender. Despite the dimming light, the sunglasses remained on, masking their eyes. It was an unusual choice, but in this fading twilight, it made their intentions even more inscrutable. "Where are you headed?" I inquired, my voice carrying a mix of concern and curiosity. The hitchhiker seemed to mumble something, their words barely audible. It was as if they were talking to themselves or to someone I couldn't see. I leaned closer, straining to catch their response. I said, "Where are you headed?" I repeated, a hint of unease creeping into my voice. Still, there was no clear response. The hitchhiker remained silent, their gaze fixed on some unseen point beyond the windshield. My unease deepened as I considered the peculiar silence that now enveloped us. For the duration of the ride, our interaction was limited to these futile attempts at conversation. The hitchhiker never uttered a word, and I found myself grappling with a growing sense of disquiet. The car's interior felt more stifling with each passing mile, despite the cool breeze that wafted in through the open windows. As the minutes turned into miles, the world outside transformed into a desolate expanse. The sun had completely disappeared behind the horizon, leaving only the faint glow of the moon to guide us. The hum of the tires against the road provided a rhythm to our eerie silence, a constant reminder of the isolation that surrounded us. I made several more attempts to engage the hitchhiker, but each effort was met with the same unnerving silence. It was as though they were a passenger from another dimension, separated from the reality I inhabited. I couldn't help but wonder what lay behind those dark lenses, what secrets they were concealing. The journey, now cloaked in an unsettling quiet, carried on until a peculiar and unexpected moment occurred. Without warning, the hitchhiker's hand moved, catching the edge of my peripheral vision. They were making a strange, deliberate motion with their fingers, forming a signal I couldn't quite decipher. It was like they were tracing an invisible pattern in the air. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of the gesture. Why did they want me to stop here, in the middle of nowhere? A multitude of possibilities swirled through my mind. Was I walking into a trap? Could this be some elaborate ruse? Despite my growing apprehension, I cautiously decelerated and pulled over to the side of the road. The car came to a stop, and the engine idled quietly. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were treading into unfamiliar and possibly dangerous territory. The hitchhiker opened the car door and stepped out, disappearing into the night without so much as a backward glance. Their figure was swallowed by the darkness, leaving me with a profound sense of bewilderment. I watched in stunned silence as they vanished into the obscurity of the night. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, my mind racing with unanswered questions. What had just transpired? Why had the hitchhiker abruptly left my car in the middle of nowhere, leaving me with a head full of mysteries and a heart full of unease? This story happened 38 years ago. I was still a detective at that time, and it all happened in the surroundings of a small town in the state of California. The night air was heavy with anticipation as I settled into the shadows of my unmarked car, parked discreetly at the edge of a desolate road. My mission was clear: stake out the remote highway in hopes of catching the elusive killer responsible for a string of unsolved murders that had haunted our city for months. Each victim had been strangled, their lifeless bodies left as cruel, haunting reminders of the evil that lurked in the darkness. I adjusted my binoculars and peered out into the inky abyss. The hours dragged on, the silence punctuated only by the occasional distant hum of a passing vehicle. I felt like a ghost, waiting in the night for another to appear. As the early hours of morning crept by, my eyelids grew heavy and my resolve began to waver. That's when I saw her, a figure emerging from the darkness, a silhouette of desperation. She was a hitchhiker, the kind of lost soul who was all too common on these deserted roads. Instinct told me to keep my distance, but something about her struck a chord. Maybe it was the way she stumbled, the tremble in her movements, or perhaps the wild look in her eyes. She was different from the usual drifters who wandered these roads, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she might be connected to the murders. Before I could make a decision, she was at my car window, rapping on the glass with desperation in her voice. "Please, you have to help me. I've got crucial information about those murders. You're the detective, right?" Her words sent a chill down my spine. How did she know who I was? My heart raced as I considered the possibilities. Was she part of the killer's sinister game, or was she genuinely a potential witness who had stumbled upon the truth? I hesitated for only a moment before unlocking the door and motioning for her to get in. As she climbed into the passenger seat, I noticed her trembling hands and the dirt-streaked, disheveled appearance that hinted at a recent ordeal. "What do you know?" I asked, keeping my voice calm and measured. She glanced around nervously before leaning in closer. "I was hitchhiking, like I've been doing for weeks. I've been on the run, but last night I overheard something. The killer's plan. I know where he'll strike next." My heart raced as I considered the possibilities. If this woman had stumbled upon the killer's intentions, her information could be invaluable in finally putting an end to the reign of terror. "Tell me everything," I urged. She spoke in hushed tones, detailing a chilling conversation she'd overheard in a rundown roadside diner. According to her, the killer planned to strike again tonight, at an abandoned farmhouse not far from our location. The details were too precise to be a coincidence. If she was telling the truth, we had a golden opportunity to catch the monster red-handed. I turned the car around, my thoughts a whirlwind of uncertainty. The hitchhiker, who introduced herself as Jane, was now my reluctant partner in this dangerous game. As we approached the farmhouse, its dark, looming silhouette sent shivers down my spine. The anticipation was unbearable, and I couldn't help but question the authenticity of Jane's story. With our guns drawn, we approached the decaying structure. Every creak of the floorboards echoed like a gunshot in the silence. The darkness inside was oppressive, and our flashlights cut through the thick, suffocating gloom. Then we heard it. A faint rhythmic sound, like a heartbeat in the night. It led us deeper into the house, where the source of the sound revealed itself. In a dimly lit room, a chair sat empty except for a solitary metronome, its pendulum clock swaying hypnotically. A sudden realization struck me. We had been led into a trap. I turned to confront Jane, but she was gone. Panic set in as I realized that the person I had trusted to lead me here was nowhere to be found. I retreated from the room, my gun trained on the door, but it was too late. The heavy wooden door slammed shut, the sound reverberating through the house like a death knell. I was trapped, my heart pounding, my breath ragged. The lights flickered on, revealing a nightmare. Photographs of the murder victims adorned the walls, each one captured in the moments before their death. The metronome continued its relentless ticking, marking the seconds of my dwindling time. And then the voice came, a whisper in the shadows. "You were so close, detective, but you'll never catch me." The killer, concealed in the darkness, taunted me with their eerie voice. It was clear that Jane had been nothing more than a pawn in their sinister game. They knew my every move, and I'd walked right into their trap. With adrenaline pumping through my veins, I retraced my steps, searching for an escape route. But the house was a labyrinth of horrors, designed to disorient and terrify. The voice continued to mock and taunt, growing closer with each passing second. Finally, I stumbled into the room I had entered through. The door was ajar, and I burst through it, sprinting into the moonlit night. The metronome's haunting rhythm faded into the distance as I gasped for breath. I called for backup, and a team of officers arrived at the farmhouse, but it was too late. The killer had vanished without a trace, leaving me with nothing but the cold realization that they were always one step ahead. In the days that followed, my colleagues scoured the evidence left behind by the killer, but the clues were few and far between. It was as if they had anticipated our every move and taken great pleasure in toying with us. I couldn't shake the feeling that the killer was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. And I couldn't escape the nagging doubt that Jane, the hitchhiker, had known more than she let on. Had she been a pawn, a distraction, or something more? It was a quiet, moonlit night on the desolate stretch of highway, and I was cruising down the empty road. The hum of the engine and the occasional flicker of my headlights were the only companions I had. The drive had been long, and I was itching to get back home. As I approached a dimly lit curve, I saw a figure on the side of the road, a silhouette bathed in the eerie glow of my headlights. My initial instinct was to drive past, as picking up hitchhikers in the dead of night was far from being a wise decision. But as I got closer, I saw the hitchhiker, a disheveled-looking man with scruffy facial hair and ragged clothes. He held out his thumb, his eyes reflecting the desperation that must have plagued him. My heart went out to him, and I decided to pull over. He approached the car with a grateful smile, his voice quivering with relief as he thanked me repeatedly for stopping. His name was Alex, and he seemed like a genuinely nice guy who had fallen on hard times. We exchanged some pleasantries, and I felt good about helping someone out in their time of need. As we continued down the road, Alex began to give me directions to where he needed to be dropped off. He assured me it wasn't too far away from where we were. I glanced over at him and saw the gleam of gratitude in his eyes. I had no reason to doubt his intentions at that point, and I continued to follow his guidance. However, as we drove on, a sense of unease began to creep over me. The road grew narrower, and the surroundings started to look unfamiliar. It was as though we were veering off the beaten path into the unknown. My suspicion grew stronger when I saw a tattered placard on the side of the road that read, "Beware, danger ahead." I still hit the gas pedal on the gravel of the dirt road that was crunching beneath my tires. My heart was pounding, and I couldn't believe the dangerous situation I was trapped in. As I drove more and more miles, I couldn't help but wonder what was the motivation of Alex to lead me down that treacherous path. I tried to shake off the nagging feeling that something was amiss, but I couldn't ignore it any longer when I saw another placard. This time was different from the other one. It was just a big red skull. Panic surged through me, and I realized I had to confront the situation. I slowed the car down, and Alex turned to me with a sinister smile that sent chills down my spine. It was then that I knew I had made a grave mistake. My heart raced as I thought about my options. I had a Glock concealed in my coat, a precautionary measure I had taken for situations just like this. With a trembling hand, I reached for the gun and held it steady. The tension in the car was palpable as I turned to Alex, my voice steady but firm. "You need to get out of the car right now," I told him. "I don't know what your game is, but I'm not going any further." Alex's smile faded, replaced by a look of surprise and disbelief. He knew I meant business, and for a moment, I feared he might do something desperate. But he didn't argue. Without saying a word, he opened the door and stepped out of the car, disappearing into the darkness. I wasted no time. I hit the gas pedal and sped away, the gravel of the dirt road crunching beneath my tires. My heart was still pounding, and I couldn't believe the dangerous situation I had narrowly escaped. As I put miles between us, I couldn't help but wonder what had motivated Alex to lead me down that treacherous path. The night's events left me shaken and wary of ever picking up another hitchhiker, but they also served as a stark reminder that appearances could be deceiving. It was a night I would never forget, a night when a simple act of kindness turned into a harrowing encounter with the unknown.